What if the greatest traitor in hell wasn't Lucifer but Beelzebub? No one expected a war within the fall itself. Lucifer wasn't alone. When he was cast down, he dragged with him a legion of names erased from history. Among them, one who dared more than the rest, Beelzebub. He bowed to neither heaven nor Lucifer's new throne in the abyss. And there, in the silence where fire does not crackle, the most forgotten conspiracy in the universe began. If hell has a king, why does it also have a lord of the flies? Beelzebub, mentioned in apocryphal texts as Baal-zebub, was a prince among the fallen. But there's a secret the scribes never dared to write. He didn't follow Lucifer out of loyalty. He followed him out of ambition. Why are there so many different names for evil in ancient writings? Were those names actually fighting each other? From the very beginning, Revelation barely whispers his name. The canonical Gospels dismiss him as a minor demon, but in Gnostic papyri and Babylonian traditions, Beelzebub was far more than that. He was the hidden rival. While Lucifer rose again in the shadows with broken glory, Beelzebub built his own court, within hell, but beyond the reach of any throne. What if hell isn't a kingdom, but a battlefield? The Essene scrolls speak of a silent war between the princes of the abyss. In the Qumran manuscripts, a distorted name appears, Beelzebul, tied to the corruption of divine light. Not through rebellion, but through usurpation, who tried to steal Lucifer's throne. Even from the depths of the abyss, fragments of Syriac tradition describe a secret pact. Beelzebub is said to have swayed a faction of the fallen, angels to serve him not out of faith, but out of fear. This was the birth of the first infernal division, but that was before the ultimate betrayal, and it didn't come from heaven. It would come from hell itself. And by the time Lucifer discovered that a throne was being forged in his shadow, it was already too late. What do you think about this? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Not every angel fell. Some were pushed. While the world focused on Lucifer's fall, deep within the forgotten corners of hell, something greater was taking shape. Beelzebub didn't just want freedom. He wanted dominion. And for that he had to do more than betray heaven. He had to betray hell itself. Why do ancient texts speak of broken legacies among the fallen? How many thrones existed? In the depths, Hermetic documents mention assemblies in darkness, secret gatherings of fallen principalities, where Beelzebub proclaimed himself the true heir of corrupted light. He didn't see Lucifer as a leader, but as a shattered symbol of a failed rebellion. What if Lucifer was the face of the fall, but Beelzebub, the architect of a new empire? In forgotten Ethiopian traditions, there is a figure called the Lord of Lament, described as a being with decaying wings and unblinking eyes. Many link this figure to Beelzebub, a being who doesn't scream, but whispers. Screams build revolutions, but whispers build kingdoms. Lucifer in exile kept a crumbling court, made up of former archangels, sowers of chaos, but Beelzebub gathered the disillusioned, those who no longer saw Lucifer as a redeemer, but as a prisoner of his own pride. What if true hell isn't made of fire, but of clashing ideologies among the exiled? Gnostic Gospels speak of an angel consumed by the ego of shadows, who offered fallen angels something heaven never did. Autonomy, no throne. Only inverted hierarchies and power through cunning. What if the original sin in hell was political? In Phoenician lore, there's an account of the Council of Ashes, where Lucifer confronted Beelzebub for the first time. But what he found wasn't an enemy. It was an ally who had become something beyond an angel. When light is corrupted, does it shatter or multiply? And in trying to crush Beelzebub's uprising, Lucifer unknowingly ignited something far worse, a civil war in the depths. If this moved you, like this video and help spread the word. Hell didn't begin with fire, it began with the blood of angels. While mortals were learning to fear the devil, hell was learning to fear something far older, the war among the fallen. Beelzebub was no longer whispering, he was marching, and his army spread like a virus at the heart of the abyss. What if the true apocalypse isn't coming, but already happened deep within the underworld? Whose texts speak of the first insurrection of Abaddon, where principalities deserted Lucifer's rule. But few know that rebellion was secretly fueled by Beelzebub. The first war in hell wasn't about freedom, it was about power. Among the traitors, long-erased names resurface. Thamiel, Verin, Balaam. They bowed to Beelzebub not out of devotion, but for a promise. A hell without kings. But it was a lie. Beelzebub didn't want equality. He wanted what Lucifer had abandoned, the universal throne of ruin. In Chaldean tradition, there are legends of underground temples, where angels' names were burned into coal. It's said that Beelzebub performed rites of inversion there, turning light into darkness and darkness into authority. What if Beelzebub was never hell's servant, but its true founder? When Lucifer discovered the uprising, he didn't respond with rage. He responded with silence. He knew you don't face Beelzebub with fire, but with destiny. Fragments from the Gospel of Burial, banned from the Christian canon, speak of this. And among the sons of exile, one drew maps in the dust to kill Lucifer himself. The name scratched out Beelzebul. Who wrote those maps? Who followed them into the deepest pit? Beelzebub didn't just try to usurp control of hell. He tried to erase Lucifer's name from celestial history, like an emperor erasing the faces of defeated kings. And then, at the peak of the conflict, a new figure entered, not from hell, but from the edge of forgotten Eden. An observer, a judge, a traitor to both sides. And when he arrived, the very gates of hell began to tremble. The true judgment was just beginning. Subscribe. What comes next is even darker. Before hell could choose a king, a judge was sent from the shadows, in the abyss torn by war, where Lucifer locked himself away in silence. And Beelzebub built an empire on lies. A new name began to echo, but no one dared to speak it. An angel who did not fall, who did not rise, who simply watched. What if there are angels who serve something greater than heaven or hell? Among the Nag Hammadi scrolls, a forgotten being is described as the one whose eyes reflect no light, no wings, no face, no time. They say he was created before the rebellion, and his only mission is to judge those who stray. On both sides, he doesn't belong to any hierarchy, doesn't answer to God, doesn't fear Lucifer, doesn't serve Beelzebub. And what if there's a third force in the universe, older than creation itself? The Gospel of the Ebionites, erased from history, tells that at the moment of the first betrayal, a being named Satariel appeared before the shattered throne, not to punish, but to observe who would become worthy of the fall. Could good and evil be just pieces on a much larger board? As Beelzebub forged alliances with lords of destruction, and Lucifer tried to restore order among the exiled, Satariel descended in silence. Only the oldest remembered him, and they trembled. Why has heaven never spoken of the judges of the abyss? In the fragments of the Codex Aleppo, Satariel is described as the mirror of intent, the shadow that walks both realms, not servant, not rebel, only the balance. And it was he who spoke the first prophecy. Of the two kings, only one will remain, but neither shall be the same. Beelzebub saw him as a threat, Lucifer as a sign. But what no one expected was that Satariel hadn't come to judge, but to trigger the collapse. Who profits from the ruin of both heaven and hell? As the legions prepare for the final clash, Satariel begins what he calls the judgment of the abyss, not with swords, but with forgotten memories. And when Satariel whispered Beelzebub's true past, hell froze. For the first time, share this with someone who needs to see what was hidden. Beelzebub wasn't born in the shadows. He was forged in the purest light. Before the fall, before the rebellion, before the name Lucifer was ever whispered in fear, Beelzebub was one of the 7 archangels. He wasn't just another servant of the throne. He was its hidden architect. What if the most feared among the fallen once stood at the heart of paradise? In the Syriac apocryphal Gospels, there's mention of a being called Zebuliel, whose role was to guard the gateways between worlds. He didn't punish, he didn't teach, he observed and decided who was worthy of crossing the boundaries of creation. What truth could drive even an archangel to madness? It was in the depths of the light that Beelzebub first saw a divine contradiction. He noticed something no other angel dared question. Heaven was a golden prison, radiant, yes, but with no room for freedom. What if free will was never a gift, but a trap? According to the book of Raziel, a passage never fully translated from ancient Hebrew states, Zebuliel, upon gazing into order, saw the lie hidden in silence, and he did not wish to rule, but to choose. That desire was the first sin, but he didn't fall, he negotiated. Forbidden fragments from the Testament of Solomon describe a pact between Zebuliel and an entity older than time itself, the nameless void, in exchange for true consciousness. Beelzebub gave up his right to eternity. What if hell isn't a punishment, but the price of an ancient deal? When Lucifer's rebellion erupted, Beelzebub wasn't among the first to fall. He leapt, not out of loyalty, but because he saw in the chaos the only chance to create his own cosmos. How many leaders have been mere pawns in a game played by someone far older? Satariel knew this truth, and when he revealed it before the fallen, in front of Lucifer himself, trust shattered. Lucifer realized, perhaps for the first time, that he had never been in control. Beelzebub wasn't the traitor, he was the silent player. And when Beelzebub smiled, his corrupted wings wide open, he didn't speak a word. He simply pointed toward heaven, as if to say, it's not over. Have you ever wondered about this? Share your thoughts in the comments. While heaven watched the angels, Beelzebub whispered to kings. The eyes of hell were not fixed solely on the abyss. While Lucifer struggled to restore his authority in the shadows, Beelzebub was already walking among men, and he didn't need rituals, nor possessions, just influence. What if hell never needed to invade the world? Because it founded it from the beginning? In the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are encrypted accounts of an entity who doesn't seduce, but guides, whispering to empires, breathing into the ears of priests, twisting doctrine straight from the altar. How many doctrines were born of divine revelation, and how many from manipulation? Beelzebub appears in Phoenician records as Baal-zebub, the lord of the flight. But he didn't fly through the skies. He flew over thrones, alliances, and ideologies. Historical reports suggest his presence behind the scenes in Jerusalem, at religious councils, in political decisions that shaped entire centuries. What if hell has representatives within the very walls of temples? In a forgotten letter from Origen, a line erased by the Council of Nicaea once read, "The most subtle among the fallen does not appear as a serpent, but as light interpreting scripture with twisted intent." Beelzebub didn't possess bodies. He possessed ideas, ideas that seemed harmless, until they sparked revolutions. In the 11th century, the Black Death was blamed on divine punishment. But in occult texts, it said a pact was made with Beelzebub, fear traded for control by the advisors of nobles. What if collective suffering is a currency? Who's collecting and who's profiting? While Lucifer was demonized as the visible rebel, Beelzebub was revered as a spiritual guide in disguise. His names have changed, but his methods haven't. From Beelzebub to Baphomet, from ancient oracles to modern leaders of crowds, he never wanted worship. He wanted to be inevitable. And now, as the war in hell escalates, Beelzebub already has an army on earth, made of ideas, doctrines, and myths, and no one suspects a thing. Because when heaven finally descends to earth, it won't just find heresies. It will find a throne already taken. Like this, if any part of it made you uncomfortable. To defeat Beelzebub, Lucifer didn't call upon angels, but nameless exiles. Hell no longer saw him as king. Earth treated him as myth, and heaven as an eternal threat. But Lucifer knew the forgotten corridors of creation. He knew where those who were neither saved nor damned still lingered. What if there are beings older than the fall and more dangerous than redemption? Forbidden texts of the Kabbalists speak of a place between realities, Qliphoth, the shell of being, the shadow of Eden. There dwell the primordial exiles, renegade spirits, imprisoned before humanity ever existed. Why is no one told what was cast out? Before creation itself, Lucifer descended into that abyss, not as a king, but as a beggar for power. And there, within the screaming silence, he spoke the name that should never be spoken. Amizur, the first traitor, the one who tried to fuse light and darkness, and was erased from existence. With him came others. Serial, the fallen who refused to fight. Penamu, who taught man to write. Before Adam could even speak, Ereshtu, who whispers in the dreams of ancient gods. All renegades, all forgotten, all hungry. Lucifer didn't promise them victory. He promised vengeance against the heaven that denied them, against the hell that buried them, and above all, against Beelzebub, the usurper. When all sides fail, the forgotten become the judges. But there is a price. Awakening the exiles fractures time, weakens the boundaries of reality, and breaks the ancient pact of balance. What if the universe itself is forced to take a side? In Mandean tradition, there is an ancient whisper. When the sound of the fall echoes 3 times, the 4th will bring total ruin. Lucifer has just made the 3rd echo, and Beelzebub knows it. That's why he's preparing his final move. He doesn't want to defeat Lucifer. He wants to erase his name from creation. And now, with the exiles unbound and the throne of hell in ruins, time itself has begun to bleed. Subscribe. The truth doesn't end here. If heaven created paradise, Beelzebub created the mirror. Lucifer had freed the exiles. The timelines were shattered, and heaven remained silent. But Beelzebub acted. He knew that defeating Lucifer on the battlefield of darkness was useless. So he came down to earth with a new plan, to create an Eden without God. What if the next creation doesn't come from heaven, but from the deepest depths of hell? In fragmented Gnostic scriptures, there is mention of a place beyond time. Irkal, a parallel reality, where there is no sin because there is no holiness. It's said that Beelzebub laid a new foundation there, with his own rules, with a humanity reshaped in his own image. Who would we be if we had never been molded by the light? In the Gospel of the Serpent, a hidden text attributed to radical Ebionites, we read, "And the Lord of the Flies stretched out his hand over the ancient clay, not to breathe life, but to sow unrest." Beelzebub didn't create men. He created twisted echoes of humanity. There are no commandments, no faith, no fall. Only raw will, unfiltered, unrestricted. A world where sin isn't a mistake, but the very essence of existence. And then he began to infiltrate this dark Eden into our reality. Through warped prophetic dreams, through desert apparitions, through visions that drove saints mad. What if false miracles are just windows into that new world? Beelzebub doesn't just want victory. He wants to rewrite creation, erase the idea of good, neutralize evil, and leave only instinct as the universal law. Lucifer's exiles can feel the fabric of reality tearing. Each new corrupted soul accelerates the transition, until both worlds merge into one. And when that happens, not even God may be able to intervene. What if free will was, from the very beginning, the virus Beelzebub planted? In the Codex of Chirac, a lost Armenian tome, it is written, "The final war will not be between angels and demons, but between 2 creators, and a world torn between them. And when the Dark Eden finally touches the earth, humanity will have to choose between a silent God and a demon who offers everything. Tag someone who would dare watch this to the end." What if the end isn't destruction, but a carefully planned forgetting? The war is no longer between heaven and hell, not between angels and demons. Now it's unfolding within reality itself. And with every passing second, Beelzebub's Dark Eden grows, spreading like fungus through the bones of time. But Lucifer does not bow. What if the greatest power isn't in fire, but in what's been erased? In fragments of the Ethiopian Book of Enoch, there is a cryptic line, "And the first of the fallen sealed a cycle with the lords of time, hiding memories in flesh not yet born." In his final act, Lucifer calls upon the most mysterious beings ever mentioned in Hermetic, Sumerian, and occult traditions. The archons of the record. They are not angels, not demons. They are living memories. What if everything forgotten is just waiting to be remembered? In a crossing between worlds, Lucifer does not descend into hell, but into the depths of time itself. There, in the chambers of what once was, he rewrites his own fall, not as history, but as symbol, myth, and archetype, not to change the events, but to change their meaning. What happens when the past no longer means what we were taught to believe? In the Codex Lagrimatus, a lost manuscript from the Library of Alexandria, there is mention of a forbidden ritual, Memoriam Demonis, a spell that embeds memories into human beings. Lucifer performs the ritual, not on himself, but on humanity. From that moment forward, thousands across time and space begin to dream of alternate realities, where Lucifer was not the fallen, but the sacrifice, where Beelzebub was the true destroyer, where heaven lied. Memories become weapons, consciousness becomes a battlefield. The very idea of good and evil begins to collapse. And if absolute truth is impossible, who wins, the loudest voice or the one most remembered? Beelzebub, sensing what's coming, invokes oblivion, a force even older than he is. Lethe, the entity of erasure. Lethe offers Beelzebub a final solution, not just to erase Lucifer, but to erase everyone who remembers he ever existed. And then time begins to crack. The stars die in silence. Names vanish from stone. Memory bleeds, and as Lucifer's name fades from books, from minds, and from the skies themselves, one child somewhere on Earth still remembers. If this disturbed you, that was the point, leave a comment. What if Lucifer never tried to destroy us, but to awaken us? The timelines have been torn, the last memories sealed. Heaven remains silent, hell lies in ruins, and in the center of the void, two presences still remain: Lucifer, Beelzebub. What if good and evil are only echoes of a truth even more unsettling? The Dark Eden now touches the edge of reality. Humanity can feel, but cannot explain, the invisible weight of a world rewritten without consent. Recurring nightmares, symbols in dreams, memories of things that never happened, yet hurt as if they did. Within the child who still remembers Lucifer's name lies the last spark of divine memory, not because she was chosen, but because she was never touched. What if the only place truth survives is in the collective unconscious? Beelzebub prepares the final blow. Lethe, the entity of forgetting, raises her blade of silence. But just before Lucifer's name is erased from creation, Lucifer looks at Beelzebub, and I decile cette station, and smiles, because in the end it was never about victory. It was always about meaning. In the apocryphal Gospels of the Nazarenes, there is a rejected verse. The first to fall was not the one who disobeyed, but the one who remembered too much. Lucifer knew he would never be restored. He knew heaven would not forgive him. He knew humanity would never understand him. But he also knew, if even one mind remembers, the erasure could never be complete. Beelzebub crumbles into ruin, not from defeat in battle, but because everything he built depended on silence. And now the name Lucifer is whispered in the deepest corners of human consciousness, not as a curse, but as a question. What if he was right? Lethe withdraws, not out of mercy, but because you can't erase what has become a symbol. Reality begins to rebuild itself, not as heaven, not as hell, but as doubt. Doubt is Lucifer's legacy. The world will never be the same, not because it was destroyed, but because nothing can be accepted blindly anymore. And in the silence that remains, a voice cuts through the veil. If all of this is real, why are our eyes still closed? If all of this is real, drop your truth below.